So last week, we started the first of our 2 summer series. It's entitled, I Wish You Were Here. And basically, we said 2 important things last week. The first important thing that we said is our wishes do not determine our destinations. Our direction determines our destination. All right. We believe this in the world of geography, but sometimes when it comes to our relationships, or when it comes to our finances, or when it comes to our faith, we live like we can go any old direction, or take any old road, or any old path, and end up where we want to, and everything will be just fine. Like if I told you, hey guys, I'm going to South Carolina, but I get on I-64 and I head west, you would think I was a crazy person because I-64 west will never get me to South Carolina, right? But the truth is we live like we can do whatever we want and everything will just be fine. That was the first thing that we said. It's not our wants, wishes, desires, good intentions that determine our destination. It's the direction that we choose to go. And the second important thing that we said last week was actually a passage of Scripture. It's a Bible verse. All right? And we said that if we would write this passage of Scripture on our hearts, if we would, bury it deep inside of ourselves, that we would save ourselves lots of heartache and we would probably be able to avoid many unfortunate events. The passage that we're talking about was Proverbs chapter 27 verse 12. And in fact, I had you repeat it to me a couple times. It says, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. All right, and we're going to do it one more time like today together. All right, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to just say that passage together. All right, you ready? It's 1, 2, 3. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Those 2 ideas. One, that it's not our wants, wishes, desires, or best intentions that determine our destination. It's our direction. And the fact that the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Those were the 2 big ideas that we kind of threw out last week. And if you weren't here last week, I would just really encourage you, download our app. You can listen to the sermon on it. You can visit LincolnHillsChristian.com and listen to our sermons there. You can even get on YouTube and listen to all of our 2018 sermons there. But I would just encourage you at some point this week to do that, because what we talked about last week is kind of foundational for everything that we're going to say throughout the entire series, and I think you would benefit a great deal from checking it out. Now, let me ask you a question. Does anybody here like being told what to do? Not a lot of hands. I'm not really surprised. I do not like being told what to do. I don't like being bossed around. Now, there are some things that I would, quickly tell you. I'm not a mechanic. I don't know anything about cars, and so if somebody wants to coach me on doing something, I'll listen. I'm not the most tech-savvy person in the world, and so if there are things I don't understand, I don't mind to listen. But there are lots of things, lots of areas in life I do not necessarily want someone's feedback. All right, like driving down the road. Like, you're going too fast. You're going too slow. You're in the wrong lane. You need to be over there. You're going to miss the exit. Stop. I've been driving for almost 20 years. I've got this. If you think I'm going too slow, I've been driving a PT Cruiser for 10 years. If you think I'm going too slow, that's fine. Drive your car. I'll meet you there. I don't need you to coach me on driving. Okay? And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a good quality. And maybe it's a guy thing. I know lots of guys, and maybe you're one of them, fellas, you're not going to stop and ask for directions. If we're lost, we're going to stay lost. Sorry. Oh, look, I didn't even know that was there. We never would have found it if we weren't lost, right, family? I know lots of guys who aren't going to stop and ask for directions. I know lots of guys who, they get something new and shiny, like in the mail or whatever. They maybe got it at Home Depot or something, and you got to put it together. Or maybe it's like something from Fisher Price. They're not going to read the instructions. All right? It's just the way that it is. I don't want to be told how to do this. I'll figure it out. And again, I'm not saying that this is a good quality, but I am saying that's reality. Lots of us don't like being told what to do. You may know this about me. I ran track in the 8th grade, okay? I don't know if you've been following up on me, but I was on the track team in the 8th grade. But here's the thing, I just kind of misspoke because I didn't run on the track team in 8th grade. I was a high jumper. I don't know, looking at me, you're like, yeah, textbook high jumper right there. 5 foot nothing. I can't tell you how high that I got as far as high jump, what I cleared. But I can tell you that at one time my coach called me uncoachable. And I don't know why he said that. I mean, just because I wanted to do things my way and I was bringing absolutely no experience to the team and it never worked out. I don't know why he would call me uncoachable, but he did one time, and you're going to think this is kind of funny, or maybe you're just evil. But one time I was going, it was a meet, okay? It's not like a practice. It was at a meet, and I'm going to high jump, and I run face first into the bar and end up with a really bloody nose. And I don't know if you know this about high jumping, but you're supposed to go high. You're supposed to go over the bar, okay? In fact, again, about high jump, if you're not a high jumper, maybe you don't know this, but when you high jump, your back is supposed to be to the bar, right? So how a human being can actually run face first into the bar and end up with a bloody, I don't know. Point is, I'm uncoachable, apparently. And this is not necessarily a good quality. You know what's sad, though, about guys being uncoachable or not being willing to read the instructions or ask for directions or whatever it is where you don't want to hear people's advice? The problem with that is we're robbing from ourselves because there are people who know how to get us where we want to be. If you want to get in shape, a physical trainer or a nutritionist, they can probably help you do that. If your finances aren't where you would like them to be, a financial consultant or some kind of accountant can probably help you set a budget that you can live by. Right? If you want to have the kind of marriage that you and your spouse are continually growing and falling more in love with each other, and you avoid the pitfalls that every marriage kind of has to deal with, there are other couples who are where you want to be and can help coach you through the perils that are present in every marriage. If you want to have a faith that's constantly growing and, the kind of faith that people talk about, that moves mountains, that's possible. And there are other believers around you that can help coach you and inspire you. But lots of times we don't like to listen to other folks. We don't like to take their advice. We want to do our own thing, and we undermine our success because we don't like being told what to do. Now, there's a story in the Old Testament. It's really, really interesting. And what I hope that we'll see today is that there is value in taking in godly guidance. And what I also hope that we'll see today is we risk a lot. In some cases, we risk everything by failing to take in and apply godly guidance. Now, I want to give you just a little bit of background before we dive into the text this morning, okay? God established the nation of Israel. And when he established the nation of Israel, the plan was for God to be the leader. All right, it was going to be God and the people. That's all you kind of need. You guys listen to me and things will be fine. Problem is, the nation of Israel, they started looking around at what the other nations were doing, and they were doing things just a little bit differently. All the other nations had a king. And so Israel goes to God and they say, hey, we would like to have a king too. And God says, well, this is not exactly how this was set up to work, but if you want a king, I'll give you a king. And so God gave the nation of Israel its first king, a guy named Saul. Okay, this is what he looks like. Actually, I went to the archives, found him. That's him, Saul. He reigned for about 40 years, but he was not a good king. All right? Saul had a lot of shortcomings, and the way he led Israel, he didn't lead it in a way that honored and glorified God. So when it was time to replace Saul, God replaced him with a guy named David. All right? David had a lot of good qualities. Overall, he led the nation of Israel in a way that honored and glorified God. He did have a problem with the ladies every once in a while. But the scriptures describe him as a man after God's own heart. Okay? Now, David reigned also for about 40 years. And when he died, his son Solomon took over. Okay? Solomon, we talked about him last week, and we said that he was the wisest man who ever lived. All right? He reigned for about 40 years, and his intention when he died was to have his son Rehoboam succeed him and take the throne and rule over all Israel. But that's where things get just a little bit cattywampus, just a little bit, out of kilter. Because there was this guy in Israel working for Solomon named Jeroboam. All right? Jeroboam was the head of all the forced labor in the nation of Israel. He was over about 150,000 men, a really big group of people. All right, so he's a really capable leader. He's really smart, really savvy, really qualified. In fact, Jeroboam was so smart and savvy and qualified that people started to kind of whisper, and rumors started to circulate about maybe potentially Jeroboam replacing Solomon. All right. Now, I don't know if you're a student of history or if you've ever seen, like, The Godfather. When people start to whisper about you taking the king's spot or replacing the king, it's time for you to leave or you will end up swimming with the fishes, right? With like, concrete shoes on or something. And so I don't know if Jeroboam watched The Godfather or what, but he got out of Israel. He actually escaped to Egypt, and that's where our story begins today. We're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 12. We're going to start in verse 1. If you don't have a Bible with you, that's okay. The words are going to be on the screen, but I want you to know that over here underneath the balcony on this black shelf, there are blue Bibles. If you don't have a Bible, take one. It's our gift to you because we want you to be able to take God's Word wherever you go and be able to depend on it because it's trustworthy and true. Okay? 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 1 begins this way. It says, Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone there to make him king. When Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt, where he had fled from King Solomon. He returned from Egypt. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, Your father put a heavy yoke on us. Now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. Okay, so let's just take 5 and get our bearings, establish where we are and what's going on. Jeroboam has been in exile in Egypt. Rehoboam is now king. Jeroboam shows up in front of Rehoboam with all of Israel, this big company of individuals, and he has a pretty simple, pretty benign, pretty straightforward request. He says, look, your dad led in a certain way. It was harsh. It was kind of overwhelming. It was too much. We're glad that you're king. Things are going to be great. We'll support you. The only thing that we ask is that you don't lead like your dad did. Just do things a little bit differently. Now, you may not know this about Solomon, but when Solomon was king, he had a lot of women in his life. Okay? He had like 700 wives and like 300 concubines, and that's a lot of women. Okay? Now, here's the deal. In polygamist cultures, it is customary for the husband to build each of his wives their own house. I can't imagine why you wouldn't want all your wives living in the same house. I mean, maybe I can think of a 1 or 2 reasons. But point is, in polygamous cultures, each wife gets their own house. But when you're the king, the bar is set just a little bit higher. You're not building each wife her own house. You were kind of expected to build her own like village or town or city. Okay? So when you have a guy like Jeroboam and he's showing up and he's saying, hey, we need to do things differently, it probably is helpful to know that Solomon had all these wives. That's kind of why Jeroboam had to have like 150,000 guys in his employ so he could keep up with, Solomon and all his wives and all the cities or towns or villages that he had to like build for them. And so it makes perfect sense for Jeroboam to show up with Rehoboam and say, hey, look, maybe this is a little bit expensive. This is a lot of work. If we could just do things differently, life would be better. We're willing to support you. We're glad that you're king, but let's just not do things the way that your dad did. Rehoboam responds by making two really good decisions. All right, verse 5. Rehoboam answered, go away for 3 days and then come back to me. So the people went away. Good decision number one that Rehoboam made is he said, you know what, go home and give me some time to think about this. What you've brought to me is important. What you've brought to me is valuable. What you have brought to me needs to be considered. Now you go home and give me a little bit of time to think about it. All right, good decision number 2, verse 6. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. How would you advise me to answer the people? He asked. So good decision number 1, go away, give me a little bit of time to think about this. Good decision number 2 was he went to the elders, men who had, served his father, who had been where he kind of wants to be, and he gets their advice. And here's what they say. Verse 7, they replied, if today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. So what the older, wiser men are saying, in effect, is if you want to get where you want to be, if you want to be the king of a united nation, then put their interests ahead of yours. If your destination is to be respected and admired and to be the leader of this country and to be seen as great, if that's what you want, if that's your destination, if that's your goal, if that's where you want to be, then put their desires ahead of yours. Paul, I think, echoes this same idea in Philippians chapter 2, verse 4, where he says to the Philippians, do not merely look out for your personal interests, but also for the interests of others. This is great advice. And Rehoboam made 2 great decisions. He took a little bit of time and he got good advice. Verse 8. But Rehoboam rejected the advice the elders gave him. Make no mistake. This is what Rehoboam needed to hear, but it wasn't what Rehoboam wanted to do. It was what Rehoboam needed to hear, but it wasn't what Rehoboam wanted to do. And let's be honest, this was where Rehoboam wanted to go, but it wasn't how Rehoboam wanted to get there. It was what he needed to hear, but it wasn't what he wanted to do. It was where he wanted to go, but it wasn't how he wanted to get there. And the truth is, maybe the takeaway is this. We usually end up in bad places. We usually don't end up where we want to when we do exactly what we want to do. Anybody ever run out of money before you ran out of month? It's happened to me a few times, especially when I was a little bit younger. I would get to the end of my money, and I'm like, well, there's still like a week and a half left. What am I supposed to do? This is uncomfortable. And I'm going to start to think, well, how did this happen? Like, I didn't buy anything super expensive. I'm not living lavishly. I don't understand. But you know what I did? Like in the console of my 1994 Grand Prix, I would pop open and I'd put all my receipts in there, and I pulled them out in McDonald's and Hardee's and Burger King. And it wasn't like one big purchase. It was lots of little purchases. In my mind, I'm hungry, so I'm going to go get some food. I did what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And when you do what you want to do when you want to do it, you don't often end up where you want to be ultimately. Anybody ever have that thing happen to you where like you've got your winter clothes put away like in one of those big like Rubbermaid containers, and you go to get it out for like the next season, summer's over, and you put on your winter clothes and you go to button your jeans and you're like stretching and you're straining and you're like, I don't understand. What you feel like you're going to bust a gut or something trying to get those things to latch. And then you look at the jeans, you hold them up, and then you rub your eyes and you look again at the tag and you're like, what is going on here? I know I wore a 30-something, right? That's happened to me. And I can tell you how it happened. It's not complicated. Like on the nights that I know I should go out and I need to go run. I need to work off what I've eaten today. But you know what? Netflix is on. I can just chill here and life will be good. I did what I wanted to do instead of what I knew I needed to do. And when you do what you want to do, you don't often end up where you ultimately want to be. Right? Continue on in verse 8. So he's rejected the elders' advice, and he consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He asked them, "What's your advice? How should we answer? How should we answer? How should we answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your fathers put on us'?" The young men, that's how they sound. The young men who had grown up with him replied, "These people have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter.' Now tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions.'" Those are kind of guys you want to run around with, right? Like, I want to hang out with these fellas. In effect, what they're saying, hey, go tell the people this. If you thought my dad was a heavyweight, if you thought my dad was a big deal, if you thought you had it bad under my dad, you've seen nothing. Wait till you get a load of me. And I just got to ask, what do these young guys know about being king? What do these young guys know about ruling a nation? What do these young guys know about keeping an entire country together? The answer is nothing. They know nothing about those things. But here's the deal. When you want to do what you want to do, you can always find people to tell you what you want to hear. When you want to do what you want to do, and you're set on doing what you want to do, you can always find people who will tell you what you want to hear. How many marriages have ended because things aren't going so well at home, and one spouse or the other goes to one of their friends, and their friend tells them, "You deserve to be happy. Leave him. You deserve to be happy. Leave her." How many friends have given us the advice or the counsel? They say, "You've earned this. Forget about the price tag. Forget about how much it costs. You deserve this. Just do it. Just splurge a little bit." How many of our students going off to college next year or in college right now are told, "You know what? It's an old book. It's the 21st century. Do what you want to do. Live how you want to live. It doesn't matter." When you want to do what you want to do, when you're set on doing what you want to do, you can always find someone who will tell you what you want to hear. Verse 13, the king answered the people harshly, rejecting the advice given him by the elders. Flash forward to verse 16. When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part do we have in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David." So the Israelites went home. We're tired of this. We're fed up. You don't care about us. Now, this is no way to talk to the king. But these people, they didn't feel like subjects. They felt like slaves. They didn't feel like people. They felt like property. All because Rehoboam wanted to do what he wanted to do. And most of the time when we do what we want to do, we don't end up where we want to be. Here, right there in the middle of verse 16, we see the beginnings of revolution. Verse 17, "But as for the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah, Rehoboam still ruled them. King Rehoboam sent Adoniram, who was in charge of the forced labor." This guy replaced Jeroboam, the guy we talked about earlier. Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam, however, managed to get into his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. Again, the very simple truth that I want us to recognize this morning is most of the time when you do what you want to do, you will not end up where you want to be. Most of the time when you just do what you want to do, you will not end up where you want to be. What we're seeing play out before our eyes is the dividing of the kingdom of Israel. But it didn't divide in half. It wasn't like 6 went here and 6 went there. No. 10 tribes left with Jeroboam and headed north, leaving only 2 tribes to support Rehoboam in the south. From this point on in the Old Testament, the north is going to be referred to as Israel, and the south is going to be referred to as Judah. And from this point on, the 2 countries will essentially be at each other's throats. Make no mistake, this is not where Rehoboam wanted to go. He didn't wake up that day thinking that 85% of his people were going to turn their back on him and walk away. But he rejected godly guidance so he could do what he wanted to do. If you're here this morning, and I don't know where you are relationally, I don't know where you are financially, I don't know where you are in your walk with Jesus, I don't know where you are in your faith. But if you are someplace that you do not want to be, you cannot continue to do what you've always done. I'm going to say that again because I want you to hear it over here too. If you are someplace that you do not want to be, you cannot continue to do what you've always done. We have to listen to the godly guides that our loving Heavenly Father has put around us. And so I just want to ask you a couple questions as we kind of wrap things up this morning. Who do you need to start listening to? Who's got good advice that you need to soak in and apply? Who's been where you want to be and can help you get there? Is there advice that somebody has pushed out in front of you, that they put it on the table for you, and you haven't accepted it and you've done nothing with it? Why? And this might be the most important question I can ask you this morning. What do you stand to risk if you fail to seek and apply godly guidance? It cost Rehoboam his kingdom. What do you seek to lose if you fail to seek and apply godly guidance? When I first started working, got my first kind of job at like 14. I worked with my grandpa at Plumber Supply. Okay? That doesn't mean I know how to plumb. That means I know how to find plumbing supplies in a warehouse. So don't call me with a leak. I can't help you. He gave me some great advice. He said, here's what I want you to do, Frank. All right, you're getting a paycheck now. You're a big boy. You're not wetting the bed anymore. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take $50 from your paycheck, and I want you to put it towards your retirement. I'm like 14 years old. $50 a paycheck, that's a lot of money. That's $200 a month. That's a fortune. And I was 14, so like retirement, that was literally the furthest thing away from my mind. And so you know what I did? I did nothing. And well, technically I did not do nothing. What I did technically was I robbed from myself. Because the truth is that if I had taken that $50 a week or that $200 a month and I had put it into my retirement, if nothing else happened to it but I just remained faithful to doing that, I would have like $45,000 sitting in the bank today. Right? $45,000 is a lot of guacamole. But we live in America, the greatest nation on the planet, and we have this thing in America called compound interest. Students, I want you to hear that again. Compound interest. I can't explain compound interest, but let me tell you what. Michael Lindemann can explain compound interest to you, or Brian LaHue can explain compound interest to you. You just need to know that it's real and it works. So I wouldn't just be sitting on $45,000 if I had put the $50 a week or the $200 a month into my retirement, I would be sitting on, because of our friend compound interest, I would be sitting on between $100,000 and $120,000 right now if I had taken my grandfather's godly guidance. Do you know what I spent that money on when I was 14 and 15 and 16? Do you know what I spent that money on? Yeah, I don't know either. Like Fritos, clothes that I can't wear anymore. I promise you, when you get your first job, friends, if you'll take $50 and you'll put it into your retirement, starting like right now, you will not look back in 19 years and say, well, that was a mistake. That was money wasted. I promise you with all my heart, you will not regret it. On the other hand, when I think about the fact that I could have $115,000 or $120,000 like sitting in the bank for me right now, it's like a punch in the gut. That makes me sick. And the truth is, there's probably a lot of you out there that feel the same way. There's probably a lot of you out there that had wished that you started doing that a little bit earlier. There's probably a lot of you out there that had wished you'd taken your health a little bit more serious, before you had to go see the doctor and he said you don't have any other choice. What good advice is sitting right out in front of you that you need to snatch up and start applying in your life before you don't have a choice anymore, or before the only choice you have is bad? The best advice I could give you today is this, and it's better than $120,000. And here's what it is. Give everything you have to Jesus. Give your whole self to Him. And I'll tell you why that's the best advice I could give you, why it's better than even $120,000. Because everything that you have here is going to go away. Everything that you buy with your money or everything you invest your time in, none of that is going to last. But your relationship with Him will go on to eternity. In fact, there was one time in the book of Matthew, chapter 19, where a young man, he comes to Him and he says, hey, Jesus, what do I need to do to get to heaven? You see, he had a destination. What do I need to do to get to heaven? What do I need to do to have eternal life? And so Jesus turns to him and He says, it's a great question. Let me tell you. Go, sell all your possessions, give them to the poor, and then come follow me. But the scriptures tell us that that man left sorrowful because he had a lot of great things. That's how the New King James puts it. He says he was a man who had great possessions. And I understand that in that context, when they say great, they're talking about vast. But I just want to know, what great things are keeping you from following Jesus as close as you possibly can? What great things, great relationships, what great investments, what great hobbies are keeping you from giving Jesus your all? Best advice I could give you today, forget those great things and follow Jesus with everything that you have. You will not regret it. Here in just a minute, we're going to sing a song, and if you've never given Jesus your all, if you've never repented of your sins and been baptized into Christ, you can do that today. Webby will be up here, and he would love to meet with you and help you take whatever next step you might need to take with Jesus. If you just want somebody to pray with you, to maybe give you a moment to seek godly guidance, Chris is going to be in the back. I'll be in the back. We would love to, and we would be honored to talk with you for a minute or pray with you. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and they pay the penalty. If you want to get where you want to be, you can't continue to do what you've always done. What godly guide do you need to listen to? What do you need to apply in your life?